So, Brianna?
Yes.
How should we go when it starts? You should say hello and introduce me, or should I
Yes.
start?
I can absolutely. I'll sort of give a quick introduction of you, and then we'll kick it off at 12:30 Eastern, so in about 1 or 2 minutes here, just giving folks another moment to sign on.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll introduce you. And the whole thing will be recorded, and so we'll have that for posterity, and we'll be able to share as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Excellent. And can you just confirm how to say your name so that I can present you properly?
Przemek?
Shemek?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, Shemek. And then the last name?
Siemion? Ah, okay.
Shemek
Siemion?
Siemion. Perfect. I will do that. Thank you.
Folks will be surprised. Przemek Siemion.
Great. So it looks like we've got a number of folks logging in now. So I'm going to put myself on mute, and then I'll sort of chime in when we officially kick off.
Yep.
Great. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, everyone. Welcome to our EEA monthly education series. Today we are going to be discussing an in-depth look at the launch of Santander's $20 million bond with Ethereum. And today on our call, we have presenting Przemek Siemion, who is a blockchain research lead with Banco Santander. So as a reminder, this call will be recorded, and we will be sharing this on our collaboration site and our YouTube channel following this presentation. So thank you everyone for joining us today, especially those who are newer to EEA or considering a membership. We definitely appreciate and are glad you are here. And we hope that this discussion proves very interesting for you. So we'll go through our presentation, and then following that, we'll have an opportunity to answer questions. I would encourage folks to use the question button that is on your GoToMeeting panel, and I will review those questions and sort of moderate that after the presentation. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce Przemek Siemion to provide us his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Hello, everybody. As Brianna said, I'm a blockchain research guy. I'm a technologist. So as happy as I am to present this little bunch of slides, I'm not a business person. So my take on this story is mainly technology. Also, it's fair to say that even though I have been involved with the bond issuance of Santander, I could smoke the the gunpowder, and the smoke, but I was not really in the line of fire, unlike John Whelan, who maybe is joining us, who actually, managed to pull this off. Anyhow, with this caveat, let us go through those few slides that explain a little bit what has really happened. We have some technical issue. I can't present from my computer because it's a different operating system. I will need to ask Brianna to flip through slides. Can we have another one? Okay, so this is what has happened on the 12th of September this year. This is actually the press release. Banco Santander announced that it has issued the end-to-end blockchain bond. 20 millions, not too much, not too little, something truly meaningful, but completely legal and completely meaningful as a first step. And we'll try to work out what does it mean that it was meaningful and what could be potential next steps. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit of a teaser because this is a sequence of what has happened 36 days ago. As you can see, it's an interplay between a bond issuer and the investor that buys the bonds. You can see that everything goes via a trusted party, a custodian, so the intermediary is there. But even this, if you are familiar with all the mechanics of bond issuance, even this is a lot of streamlining compared to usual traditional bond issuance. As I said, it's a teaser. And you can see there is tokenization, detokenization. As we'll find out, there is quite a lot of mechanics behind those words. So let us try to work out in more simple terms what has been going on really. Next slide, please. Okay, bond basics. Please forgive everyone who is familiar with this. I don't really know my audience. Certainly, for me as a technical guy, this would be required were I not involved. So a bond is an investment device. Issuer basically sells bond pieces or tokens of bond to the investor. The investor realizes the investment over a certain time with coupons, which are fixed date, fixed revenue items. And when the bond reaches maturity, there is the principal payment and the bond is bought back by the issuer. So this is exactly the scenario that we want to recreate, but this is the scenario in a very naive and simple setup when there is no intermediary. So this is the simplified idea of what's going on. On the next slide, and Brianna, please. On the next slide, it's more like, it is happening both in reality and in our new blockchain reality. We have the issuer that calls on some facilitator. There could be different names here. It could be a custodian, it could be the dealer, or all of them. So let us stick to just one label for the middleman. And the facilitator covers the legal side, creates or prints the actual bond, takes care of the selling process, and as well in this picture it works as a clearinghouse. So it should be obvious that the issuer maintains some money deposit at the facilitator, and there should be enough on this deposit to pay out coupons, because the coupon payout also goes through this facilitator. Okay, next slide. And yeah, to finish with the boring story, the bond is actually originally was printed on paper, and the coupons were actually real cutaways, hence the name. And what is interesting to bring to attention is that the demonstration of ownership is done by demonstrating physical possession of the document, of this piece of paper. The same goes today for cash. We demonstrate that we have the cash by putting it out of our pocket. If it goes to somebody else's pocket, the ownership is gone. And I think it is important to stress that this is what changes with tokenized assets. This is what changes when we go from cash to cryptocurrencies. The demonstration of ownership is done by providing a cryptographic proof, by providing a proof that I can create only if I have the private key that is associated with the public key that is kind of painted all over the asset. Okay, so this is what we need to recreate on-chain. And on the next slide, we see how it can be played. So we have the facilitator, which for all purposes is Banco Santander. We have the issuer, and the issuer first requests and works with us on the bond creation. This is a legal process, and this legal process is safeguarded by a lot of regulations, and it cannot be omitted as of today. And in our case, it happened in full, in total, even though there is a potential to streamline that quite a bit, but still it is important that in our scenario, the legal side of the bond creation has happened. There is all the paperwork that is typically associated with the bond creation. Then there is a request to actually issue this bond when it's been created. And this is what is different, because instead of printing it on the paper, or instead of sending this to some clearinghouse, Santander has actually issued tokens, so representations of partial ownership on public Ethereum. That was very important that we used mainnet of Ethereum, because what was required was that the registry of ownership is immutable cannot be censored, is really publicly available. So this is a scenario that can be only meaningfully realized on a public blockchain. Unlike some other use cases that we also are realizing that can be done or even are better done on a private network, for the sake of issuing a regulated bond, we certainly needed public blockchain. Okay, once the bond has been tokenized, once on the public blockchain you have the representation of ownership of a bond, two things can happen. In the simple case, we would just move those tokens to wallets controlled by the issuer. So full transfer of ownership and responsibility to the issuer. Or you can imagine that the facilitator facilitates even the ownership, so it works as a custodian. And there is a record of ownership. Anybody looking at the blockchain can recognize the ownership, but actually manipulation happens through the facilitator. And I believe that for regulators, it is important that there is still this one entity that can be held responsible for whatever happens if anything suboptimal happens. So in our scenario, we produce those tokens on the public Ethereum mainnet, and we are keeping we are the custodian of those tokens for the sake of whoever owns them. Initially, it's the issuer, but of course, the purpose of issuing a bond is to sell it. It's an investment instrument. So the next slide, please. Okay, so here is the very basic and simplified architecture of the solution that we have realized. As you can see, it's quite centralized. We do use a platform that streamlines all the processes associated with bond issuance review and creation. This platform has been provided by Nivara. Nivara is a great startup from London that we've been working with, and full disclosure, Santander is one of the investors in Nivara. The platform, because we keep private keys of our customers in custody, of course, it has a safe storage solution that is multi-staged, actually. It needs to be in sync with the traditional accounting for the reasons that will be very obvious with the next slide, but the fact is that we are representing not only bonds, but also to buy or to sell bonds on blockchain, we also need to represent cash on blockchain, real fiat currency, real money on blockchain. We do this by being a custodian again. So, and there will be a slide presenting this, but let me just say that sellers would move money to our account, our custody account, and we'll represent this money as well on blockchain. The access to the platform is, of course, secured in many ways, and multi-factor authentication is a must. Also, there are all kinds of procedures for key rotation and key replacement. Even though we are learning, because this is new. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is like another very interesting aspect and important of what Santander has done, because not only we have the representation of ownership of assets and money on chain, fully trackable, but also we can use the transactional property of blockchain to perform payment versus delivery on chain, reducing the counterparty risk. So there is no moment when somebody loses control of her money and is waiting for gaining control of the assets or vice versa, because what we do is we tokenize as well the bond as the cash that is needed to buy the bond, and then we perform one blockchain transaction that exchange the ownership. So we have a true payment versus delivery. A caveat here, as you know very well, public Ethereum mainnet works on the proof of work. So even though we have practical transaction finality, we do not have formal transaction finality. That always potentially is a fork, even though the probability is absolutely minimal. So therefore, of course, there are legal safeguards around that, and this is something that we are looking forward very much to Ethereum 2.0 when transaction finality becomes real. But it is a very serious, even with this caveat, it's a very serious safeguard against counterparty risk. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is maybe the most interesting aspect of what has happened from a point of view of somebody like myself, because all this story on the 12th of September happened on chain, on the public blockchain. We can actually see this because public blockchain is practically immutable, and even though it is pseudo-anonymous, we didn't hide the addresses. So people know. I'm not revealing any secrets here. If you Google around, you'll find out most of the addresses that are associated with this issuance. So actually, anybody can verify and track and try to reverse engineer what has happened. And on the next slide, this is just an example. So if we go to this address, which is actually a contract that represents the bond, even Etherscan already recognizes that it is an ERC20-like token. Of course, it's our extension of ERC20. It has other features. We are not sharing the source code, but you can see the transactions, you can see the wallets, and you can browse and follow the addresses that show up. So I think this is something that makes regulators very happy, because you have full history. There may be some people that are not so happy with this. And there are some use cases where we would like to provide certain level of confidentiality, but this issuance is what it is. It has happened on the public mainnet, and it's out there for everybody to see, which has a funny aspect for the programmers. Next slide, please. So originally I had a slide with the name "Your bugs belong to the ages." Of course, we have made sure that there are none, but once smart contracts are out there, there are forever, or at least for as long as mainnet is gonna work, for anybody to reverse engineer, to disassemble, which is like, you know, for a financial institution is a special situation when our programs, the binary code of our programs goes public. We have taken special care, actually, not only to fix anything suboptimal about the smart contracts, but even if there was something like yellowish on the radar, and even if we knew that there is no real risk because there are other safeguards like whitelisting contracts around that, we took care that the style of the code is excellent, because we kind of assumed, and we are still very sure, that all our colleagues, like our friends from JP Morgan, for them it could be fun to go there, reverse engineer those contracts, and if there is anything, you know, like a bad style, they would laugh at us, and we don't like that. So this is where part of your computing, part of your cooking becomes also public knowledge. And the next slide. Okay, so now we are more in a position to understand this interaction. This slide is due to Joe and Whelan, and when I first looked at that, I sort of understood that for myself I would need a couple of extra slides to understand what's going on. The first thing to notice is that this is not the very beginning of the story, because it omits the creation of the bond tokens. It starts with the investor sending us cash. She sends us cash, we tokenize it, take the real money into custody, create representation of this money on chain, and then investor and issuer perform delivery versus payment, swap of ownership. This happens on chain, and then we have the whole story with coupons and the maturity payment. So yes, I think that the most important thing is that the actual exchange of ownership happens on chain, and for this you need to represent the assets, whether it's cash, fiat money, or the bond, as something that lives on chain, so as tokens, and then the game begins. Now, it is important also to see that this whole story here finishes with destroying, with the investor destroying tokens and getting the cash back. This is because this bond issuance has happened in isolation. You could imagine in the future that you have a lot of business going on chain, and tokens that you collect from one transaction you immediately want to reuse on other businesses that also happen on chain with digital assets. But this is the vision of the future. At the moment, of course, keeping tokens representing cash on blockchain doesn't make any sense. So the story finishes with destroying them. And yes, this is more or less what has happened, to the extent that a technical person like myself can understand. It is a very small and controlled step for Banco Santander, but it is meaningful because the whole legal story happened in parallel and in synchronicity with the story that happened on chain. So there is nothing fake with this scenario. The only things that one could wish for is, of course, like more business on blockchain and secondary market. Of course, there is at the moment no secondary market. It's been played in the family between entities that are associated with Banco Santander. And this leaves a lot for us to work on in the future. So yes, I would finish the presentation here, and let's try to answer some questions if you have any.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we do have some questions that got pulled in here. So we're just going to go through them. I'm going to begin at the beginning. Would it be possible to use the JP Morgan coin or other private blockchains?
In this scenario, as I said, the quality that was required by the regulator was that it's public, and so not for this scenario, and not until JP Morgan blockchain becomes publicly observable, and maybe even there is an input for JP Morgan's blockchain consensus from outside JP Morgan. No, for this scenario, it's really necessary to use public blockchain.
Thank you. Our next question is, why was ETH the choice? What were alternative public blockchains?
It's pretty obvious. The other public blockchain that is there, that has been tested and tried, is Bitcoin. But Bitcoin offers less flexibility in terms of programming your digital asset. So it's just that public Ethereum at the moment is pretty much the only device that is on one hand side public and tested, and on the other hand side allows you to program some behaviors and some safeguards into your asset. You can do this with Bitcoin, but this is awkward. This is why we are experimenting so much with Schnorr signatures, etc., because the space for programming in Bitcoin is really minimal.
Great, thank you. Next question. Why are you saying that a bond could only be issued on a public blockchain, for example, not on a private network?
Well, it's not me. And you can, of course, issue bond on any blockchain of your choice. The real question is, do you have a regulator that is gonna recognize this as a legally valid solution? So it has just happened that under UK law, if your registry has the quality of being publicly available and impossible to tamper with, it's a good registry. And public Ethereum fulfills those qualities, has those qualities. But So yeah, at least maybe, you know, maybe it's possible. We couldn't find any other solution. So even though we do have a few private networks ourselves in-house, publishing something on them would just be meaningless because it wouldn't be recognized by the regulator. It wouldn't be a legal digital asset.
Thank you.
Regulated.
Next question, who pays the Ethereum transaction fee?
A very good question. This is something we were happy to delegate to the platform provider, to Nivaura. So we pay, but we never see Ether that is connected with this transaction costs.
Thank you. Next question, what regulator entities does the bond issuance comply with?
It's been issued under the UK law. Even though it's been issued in Spain, it's governed by the law of the United Kingdom.
Great, thank you. Next question, what kind of privacy issues have you faced and how have you resolved them on the public chain?
Well, as I've said, there are privacy issues, but we went fully naked. Well, there is certain degree of pseudo-anonymity because if things go via a custodian, then the ultimate resolution, who is behind certain Ethereum address, it happens at the platform of the custodian. It could be a public or it could be a private piece of information. In our case, because there is just one known issuer and there is one known investor, and the contracts are fully public, I'd say there is no privacy, which for some regulated assets maybe is not a totally bad thing. But if the only privacy, the only simple way to provide privacy in this scenario is to provide pseudo-anonymity at access to the platform. So the platform of the custodian would provide would obfuscate the mapping between addresses and investors.
Thank you. Next question, why is the view of the regulators about privacy in the issuance of the bond on a public blockchain?
Well, it's a hell of a question for a technical guy. My guess would be that the regulator has enough of a problem understanding or getting their heads around the new technology that any additional obfuscation or privacy is just too much at the moment. It may change in the future, but at the moment, the more transparent the whole process is, the easier it is to get acceptance.
Thank you. Next question, what is the legal validity of the bond tokens? Are they the bond itself? The bond only exists represented on a chain, or
they are exactly equivalent. They are equivalent exactly to this paper printout. They are the representation of ownership of the bond. So it's a layered question. There is all the legal construct. There is all the legal description of the bond. But the actual device to demonstrate the ownership and the actual device to exchange ownership of the bond is the token. So those tokens are the exact equivalent of the paper bond that we had on slide number 5.
Thank you. And someone asked a question regarding what are the benefits of issuing bonds on a blockchain?
Okay, so admittingly, I'm not really the perfect person to answer this question, but you can imagine that you remove a lot of counterparty risk by having atomic exchange on blockchain. B, you're getting rid of a number of intermediaries. C, if everything goes through a platform, you can imagine a lot of streamlining on this platform. D, because your legal construct has to be encoded in smart contracts, it helps in streamlining also the legalese. So you can imagine, this is more of a vision, that the legal work gets, so to say, legalized, standardized, and by this, the time it takes to go through all the legal procedures is greatly reduced. But as I've said, I'm a technical expert and I could sense those benefits, but I'm not a perfect person to answer.
No worries. Thank you for answering the question. The next question is or was ISO 20222 involved here, say in the omnibus phase? Any more information on that?
No, not really. So, well, it was because the money was wired, and it was wired by SWIFT, and SWIFT is ISO 222 compliant, but nothing beyond that, not at this stage.
Great. Next question, is the bond used as a backup or support to the tokens issued, similar to how gold is for cash?
No, it's because it's really like this paper on this slide. Can we maybe, Brianna, maybe we can go and have this in front of our eyes. Go back a couple of slides to this wonderful $50.
Is this the one?
One more. Oh, this one. So truly, my understanding and my feeling is that what we have represented on blockchain is actually these guys. So it's not, what it is, it's a demonstration of ownership. So those tokens, this tokenized, if you tokenize a bond, the token represents partial ownership of the bond. And the bond is a lot of things. A bond is the legal construct, the bond is responsibilities and safeguards that are provided. But at the end of the day, you need something that works for you when you want to exchange for money. And historically, it was this kind of printout, and the coupons, you would also exchange those for money. And on blockchain, you have corresponding tokens and coupons. We have represented coupons as well. So so if you imagine that there is some problem with this piece of paper that we see on the slide, the next step is some legal action. If you have a problem with this, it's a matter of judiciary system, police maybe. Same with our tokens. Okay, we do have safeguards because blockchain is such a new thing. So we have quite a few extra legal safeguards, but in principle, you know, your token is your demonstration of ownership. There is no gold in the deposit.
Thank you. Next question is the atomic swap contract based on the hashed time lock mechanism?
As well, yes.
Great.
Yes.
And then this is just a quick legal question. For legal purposes, one cannot issue bonds on private networks? And if this is true, can you elaborate?
Well, as much as I understand, it's a matter of trust and a matter of scrutiny and a matter of proving immutability. So we need to demonstrate that once you issue tokens, you cannot tamper with the record. And once you start exchanging ownership of tokens representing bonds and representing cash, it cannot be tampered with. And unless nodes of blockchain are shared between different parties that for whom it's difficult to collude, you can't really demonstrate. If there is a wonderful blockchain solution, but it is fully hosted by Santander, you could always suspect that we do something. We even, like rehash 500 blocks because we do have quite a bit of computing power. So it's quite pragmatic. Yeah. At the moment, the only true safeguard against tampering is sharing the history, which is public blockchain. You can imagine a private network or permissioned network in which a regulator of some sort is participating, and then it's a different story. But at the moment, there is no such thing.
Thank you. Next question, how was the assurance managed regarding the tokenization to and from the blockchain?
Well, first of all, there is a lot of technology, and then there are legal safeguards if something fails there for this particular use case. But I wouldn't like to go into specific technologies. And on the other hand side, it's pretty standard with blockchain. We do believe in all this cryptography to work and to be secure. And on the other hand side, we had performed full analysis of what could go wrong and at which stage with technology, and we just had safeguards. There is nothing special about that. It's just that you review your process, you identify potential risks, and you mitigate them, and sometimes you mitigate them by legal constructs.
Thank you. How much did Santander consider using a stable coin on mainnet Ethereum for the cash movements?
Well, I'm not really in a position to answer this question. I think stablecoin is becoming a very hot topic because it has been recognized already some time ago that anything like, central bank money on blockchain is disruptive and not necessarily in a good way. So this is a very hairy, very hot topic. For this scenario, we used a very narrow purpose sort of stablecoin because it was the custodian money or representation of the money that is in custody specifically for the purpose of bond-related transactions. And we are on one hand side, Santander is of course very interested in those technologies. On the other hand side, we are very cautious about what we're doing. So there are no great plans about spoiling the world with stablecoin, as far as I know. But being a techie, my knowledge is limited.
Thank you. A couple more questions here. How did you manage compliance issues, for example, investors, KYC, etc.?
Well, I think it took half a year out of John Whelan's life. There was a lot of legal work, and we've had a number of great lawyers from inside Santander, and also we had an excellent assistance from an external lawyer firm. And any new product in a bank needs to face like 14 new product committees. And with this bond on blockchain, it was no different, even more scrutiny. So a lot of work, a lot of explaining, a lot of working out, contingency planning. That's why something that technologically is quite simple happened only in September and not earlier. It's the legal work, it's the compliance and vetting in all sorts of ways that is actually consuming the bulk of the time. A lot of work.
Thank you. A quick follow-up question on the who pays question. In terms of we pay, can you just clarify what who the we is?
Could you anchor that to the full question?
Yes. Who pays the Ether fee? From the question earlier. Just getting further clarification on who that we is that pays that.
Santander is not paying those fees directly. Santander has those costs covered by service providers. So we pay for maintaining live connection to the mainnet, and whatever costs are incurred by that on the provider side, it's isolated from us.
Thank you. And we have a question coming in regarding what is the protocol for a resale of the bond? For example, how do you reconcile the token at the custodian with the bond at the investor?
Well, the secondary market is a work in progress, even in terms of design. So it may change, but in principle, you have full separation of ownership on chain. So I don't really see a problem with this.
Great, thank you. And then another question regarding custodian. Does the custodian have to be a regulated entity under the same law?
Yes. Yes, being a custodian in this scenario means that you are very much regulated.
Great. And then a quick question regarding Nivara. Does Nivara have to demonstrate the binding between the Ethereum signing keys and the real world legal entities?
In principle, no, because this is for anybody willing to check up for verification. So if I'm like an investor, I can look onto the blockchain history and I can verify that, you know, the things that I've been told that they happened, they have really happened. There could be a situation when the regulator comes and asks for some disclosure. And for this, of course, you need to be ready. But otherwise, I think this scenario is actually, you know, quite open for review and difficult to cheat. If I buy bonds, I can immediately see on chain that I do have them, etc.
Great. Excellent. And we have one question that came in regarding developing the code. So someone is asking, did you use some sort of formal probes while developing the code?
Yes, very much. All sorts. Static analysis, probabilistic analysis, all of that, and a lot of thinking and scratching everybody's head about what could possibly. So yes, we deployed all analysis methods that we were aware of, are aware of. A lot
Great.
of vetting those smart contracts. Also because, you know, for social reasons, because our friends and competitors, it's there for them to grab and analyze.
Great. And we'll wrap it up here. One last question regarding, could you have used ethers or some stable coins built on Ethereum for the cash legs of the transaction?
We wouldn't, you know, we could for the technology stand, but it wouldn't be, we wouldn't pass it through all those compliance and regulatory bodies that you have asked about. So no, at the moment, the legal construct is legal money versus legal bond.
Great, thank you. And last, actually, we just have one more question come in here. Are investors' addresses whitelisted?
Yes.
Great. I believe that concludes the question and answer section, and we are almost at time here. So again, we thank everyone so much for joining this call today. We hope you found it insightful and informative. And again, a huge thank you to our presenter, who just did a fantastic job. Thank you so much, Przemek, for joining us today, and for Banco Santander to provide this information to our members.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for your attention.
Absolutely. Thank you again, everyone, so much. We will have our next call next month for our education series, and we look forward to seeing you then. Take care.